Welcome back, everyone. Today's story is one that really stuck with me, and I think it might do the same for you. So let's dive right in. My eyes narrowed as the arrogant man strolled over without the slightest hesitation. He took my wife's hand in his, smirking. Why settle for him? Let me show you what you've been missing. With a practiced calm, I prepared for the move I had drilled into perfection. The sickening crunch's hand-breaking echo throughout the room, followed by his agonized screams as he collapsed to the floor. The restaurant, an upscale establishment, exuded understated elegance. Dim lighting bathed the polished mahogany tables in a warm glow, while soft piano music played in the background. It was a perfect setting for power lunches and lavish celebrations, a world I once thrived in. Yet tonight, it felt like a gilded cage. My wife, sat across from me, undeniably beautiful. Her dark hair was carefully styled, and her lips matched the sleek gown that clung to her figure. Yet, despite all her grace and poise, there was a chilling emptiness in her eyes. A void I couldn't ignore. We had been married for years, but the last 6 months had introduced a subtle yet undeniable distance between us. Late nights at her law firm, cryptic messages, and unexplained absences had created a rift. I had hoped that tonight might heal that divide, a chance to rekindle what we once had. But instead, I found myself as nothing more than a spectator, watching the woman I loved slip further away. As we sipped our wine, a shadow suddenly fell over our table. I looked up to see a man in his mid-30s, tall, muscular, and radiating arrogance. His suit, perfectly tailored, couldn't hide the smugness that oozed from him. His piercing blue eyes locked onto Amal, completely disregarding my presence. Amal, he said smoothly. His voice had calculated a blend of charm and condescension. I didn't expect to see you here tonight. Amal froze, her glass hanging midair, her eyes flicking between him and me before she finally spoke. Nico, she stammered. Her voice betrayed more than she likely intended. What are you doing here? Enjoying the city, he replied with a grin. To my disbelief, he reached out, grabbed her hand, and with utter disdain added, Why stay with him? Let's dance first, and I'll show you what I can offer. The restaurant fell silent. I could feel the eyes of the other diners on us. Their gaze is heavy with curiosity. Amal attempted to pull her hand away, but Nico held it firm, his audacity sparking a fierce angle within me. I stood up slowly, the sound of my chair scraping against the floor. You have 3 seconds to let go of her hand, I said, my voice calmed but laced with danger. Nico sneered at me, and if I don't, the answer was immediate. The sickening sound of bones breaking cut through the silence, and Nico crumpled to the floor, clutching his shattered hand. His cries of pain reverberated through the room, drawing every eye to our table. Amal gasped, her face a mix of shock and fear. Other diners froze, staring in disbelief. Magnus, she whispered, her voice trembling as she grabbed my arm. What are you doing? I ignored her, crouching to meet Nico's painful gaze. I leaned in close, my voice a low whisper only could hear. This is just the beginning. I spoke, my voice lacking any trace of sympathy. You made a mistake tonight, and I will ensure you regret it. His eyes shot daggers at me, his face twisted in pain. You'll pay for this, he snarled through clenched teeth. I turned to Mal, who remained frozen in her seat. Let go, I ordered, my tone sharp. She hesitated, her wide eyes shifting between me and Nico. Now, I snapped, my voice cutting through her indecision. Slowly, she rose, her heels clicking against the floor as she followed me out. Behind us, whispers among the other diners started to swell. Growing into a low buzz of speculation, the drive home was stifling, the silence of the car thick and suffocating. Amal sat stiffly, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. I could tell her mind was racing, struggling to come up with an explanation for what had just transpired. When we pulled into garage, I shut off the engine and turned to face her. Talk, I demanded, my voice slicing to the stillness. She flinched, her composure unraveling. Damien, I don't know what you want me to say, she murmured, her eyes fixed firmly on her lap. I want the truth, I said, leaning in closer. Who is he? How long has this been going on? Tears welled up in her eyes, but I felt nothing. She had drained me of any remaining sympathy long ago. It's complicated, she began. I cut her off with a bitter laugh. Let me make it simple for you. Either you tell me everything right now, or I'll find out on my own. And trust me, you won't like how that turns out. Her shoulders slumped and the fight left her. 6 months, she admitted. Her voice barely whispered. It started 6 months ago. The confession hit me harder than I had expected. Even though I had long suspected it, I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. What was the night supposed to be? I asked, my voice unnervingly steady, a chance to humiliate me in front of everyone, to rub it in my face. No, she sobbed, her voice breaking. I didn't know he'd be there, Damien. I swear, I interrupted her sharply. Stop, I saw the way you looked at him, the way you froze when he spoke. You knew. She covered her face with her hands, her sobs filling the cramped car. I stared ahead, my mind racing. I needed answers, but more importantly, I needed a plan. The next morning, I sat in my office, the Geneva skyline sprawling before me. My mind churned with mix of anger and cold determination. Betrayal coursed through my veins like poison, but I refused to let it consume me. If Amal and Nico thought they could walk away without consequence, they were in for a rude awakening. I started with Nico. A simple online search revealed his perfectly crafted social media presence. Photos of luxury cars, private jets, and designer suits painted a picture of wealth. But beneath the polished exterior, cracks were beginning to show. Failed business ventures, lawsuits, and whispers of shady dealings all suggested that Nico was not as untouchable as he thought. I reached out to a network of associates, people in finance who owed me favors and specialized in exposing fraud. Within hours, I had a damning report on Nico. Bank records, unpaid loans, and risky investments painted the picture of a man living far beyond his means. It was enough to ruin him, but I wasn't finished yet. Next, I focused on Amal. While she pretended everything was normal, I quietly gathered evidence of her affair, emails, text messages, and even photos of her and Nico together. I stored everything in a secure digital envelope. This was a revenge, it was leverage. If she chose to fight me during the divorce, I wouldn't hesitate to use it. The final step was to ensure their downfall played out publicly. I arranged for Nico to be invited to an exclusive charity gala, one attended by Geneva's most influential figures. At the same time, I ensured the dossier detailing Nico criminal activities reached the hands of a journalist eager for scandal. By the end of the evening, his financial crimes and deceitful schemes were splashed across the front pages of newspapers all over Switzerland. Amal faced her reckoning when I handed her the divorce papers. She tried to resist, but the evidence left her no room to argue. Thanks to our prenuptial agreement, she walked away with nothing, and the court of public opinion sealed her social demise. The fallout came swiftly, with bold headlines dominating every major outlet. High society scandal. Nico he exposed for fraudulent schemes read one headline, while another laid bare every sort of detail. Financial crimes, extortion, and the systematic exploitation of wealthy women. Nico's once impeccable reputation crumbled, and he vanished into hiding. Authorities launched a full investigation, freezing his accounts and seizing his assets. Former business partners and allies quickly distanced themselves, eager to escape the fallout. Amal wasn't spared. The whispers and elite circles grew louder. Friends disappeared and invitations stopped coming. Her family, embarrassed by the scandal, distanced themselves, leaving her to face the consequences alone. When we met in court to finalize the divorce, she was a mere shell of the woman I had once known. Her grace had been replaced by exhaustion and quiet desperation. Magnus, she said softly as we left the courtroom, her voice trembling. I know I hurt you, but was all of this really necessary? I met her gaze, my expression unwavering. You made your choices, Amal. Choices of consequences. Tears welled in her eyes as she nodded silently and walked away, offering no further words. Months passed and life fell into a new rhythm. The house, once filled with tension and unspoken anger, now felt calm and peaceful. I focused on my work, closing major deals, and expanding my company's influence across Europe. The sting of betrayal still lingered, but began to fade, replaced by clarity and purpose. One evening, I attended another charity gala, this time with a newfound sense of quiet confidence. As I moved the crowd, I felt a light tap on my shoulder, turning. I found myself face to face with a woman who radiated quiet sophistication. Mr. Adler, she greeted me warmly. I'm Audrey Lane, a historian. I've heard a great deal about your work. It's impressive. We spent hours in conversation, and her wit and intellect offered a welcome contrast to the shallow interactions I had grown accustomed to. For the first time in years, I felt a spark of something real, a reminder that despite life's hardships, there was still beauty to be found. Later that night, standing on the balcony of my home, I looked out at the city lights stretching into the distance. I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point. Betrayal had wounded me deeply, but it also forged me into something stronger, raising a glass of wine to the night sky. I whispered the words that had become my mantra. Pain sharpens us, strength shapes us. As I stepped back inside, I carried with me a quiet resolve. The scars of betrayal may linger, but they no longer define me. Show your support by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Stay tuned for more exciting content.